Train. Isn't that supposed to be spelled Train? What's an SFC?
Just another attention-starved vandal, sir. I can assure you Vandal Squad has leads on the inside with all these gangs.
I want this disease eradicated. Do it.
Marc Ecko's Getting Up Contents Under Pressure combines a few different types of gameplay and wraps it all in a really interesting atmospheric storyline that's got its high points in its great dialogue, really good delivery of that dialogue, and interesting characters. The gameplay combines a few different elements. You've got your fighting engine where you're doing some on-the-ground hand-to-hand stuff, picking up weapons, bashing people over the head with it, that sort of thing. You've got your acrobatic stuff, which is more of a kind of Prince of Persia or Tomb Raider kind of thing. You're not going to be like running along walls or anything wild like that, but there's plenty of ledges to grab onto. You shimmy sideways until there's room to proceed and a lot of stuff like that. On top of that, there's also the graffiti. This game is very focused on graffiti, and the concept of getting up refers to you getting your name out on the wall with aerosol cans or markers or whatever you got. And this system also works pretty well. So all three of the gameplay systems combine to form a pretty interesting game with a good amount of variety. In Getting Up, you play as a guy named Train. Train is kind of just a guy trying to get out there and get into graffitis, writing his name, doing all that. And he's doing it in this near-futuristic city called New Radius. New Radius is basically like a retro-futuristic take on New York. The game really has kind of a near-future feel because the mayor's calling in these jackboot thugs, and there's just a lot of just cops and heavy resistance and security cameras and stuff. But at the same time, you're seeing stuff like the trains, the subway trains being replaced with the clean trains, the silver trains, and that actually happened in New York, back in the 80s and stuff like that. So there's a lot of parallels to be drawn. That's like a really interesting backdrop for the story. And basically, Train starts out just rivaling, getting out there with a rival gang and getting into trouble, getting into fights. But before too long, it starts to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And basically the game practically turns into Turk 182 at one point, where you're basically getting out there and fighting the government with graffiti. As far as the gameplay is concerned, you are doing a lot of different stuff, and for that reason, each one of the systems might not be quite as fleshed out as you might want. The fighting in the game does get deeper over time. You unlock more moves, but before too long, as you fight more and more people and get more and more used to it, you can really kind of take on 4 or more of the kind of elite guard, the CCK Silver guard, without really worrying too much about it. There's kind of ample health to be found around the levels. The acrobatics and stuff, you're doing a lot of climbing up and getting up to high locations to paint and stuff like that. That stuff's really well done. There's a couple of spots here and there where the camera doesn't work out quite as well as intended, but for every one of those, there's 3 or 4 spots where the camera actually sort of like pans over to kind of show you what you're supposed to be doing, and it seems like a really smart way to kind of make the game seem more natural. Graffiti in the game is handled by you basically walking up to a wall, and you have objectives where you need to paint on certain surfaces, but basically you get up there and you'll see an icon that's will represent your tag. You get up there, you hold down a button to start painting, and from there you kind of move your hand around to paint, and you have 2 buttons that both do the same thing at the start of the game, but eventually you unlock the ability to paint faster. Since you're trying to avoid drips, that actually makes it a little more difficult to avoid drips and do all that stuff. But once you get good with it, the painting becomes pretty easy as well. Overall, the game has a really good sense of style visually. It really does mix that whole kind of old city, kind of urban decay New York feel with a little bit of a glimpse of the future, the kind of the shiny silver trains and these big armored cops and all this stuff. So there's like a really interesting visual style at work there. And then technically, the game does run at a really smooth frame rate for most of the time. There's a couple spots here and there where we'll take a dip, but for the most part, you're good to go there. As far as the sound is concerned, the game really benefits from the quality voice acting. But on top of that, the sounds of combat, there's a lot of bass there that really makes those hits sound like they really hurt when you're hitting people. And on top of that, this is probably one of the greatest licensed soundtracks that's ever been put into a game. Not only with the song selection, but also how that music is used. The game's really been scored like a movie. It's a really, really amazing soundtrack. Getting Up's available on the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and PC. For the most part, they're roughly the same, but each version, of course, does have its quirks. The Xbox version probably comes out on top just because it's easy to get into and play. The control is very set. The PC version has the capability to look a little better, but we found it also takes a lot longer to load. The load times on the PC version really seem, just on the verge of being out of control. On top of that, the game defaults to a mouse and keyboard setup that really isn't well suited to play the game. The PS2 version's kind of a middle ground. It controls well, doesn't look quite as sharp as the Xbox version, but they're all roughly the same for their respective platforms. Getting Up Contents Under Pressure is a game that'll probably take the average player somewhere around 15 hours to complete. There's a lot of little stuff to unlock. You can find additional songs for the soundtrack, and you earn reputation points as you play that are used to unlock additional graffiti, some extra fight moves, some concept art, and a two-player beatdown mode that really isn't much to talk about. But that said, there's not a whole lot of reason to go back into the levels for extra reputation, because just through the course of normally playing the game, if you're hitting, a good portion of the secondary spots and stuff, you'll pretty much unlock everything the game has to offer, before you complete it. In short, Getting Up Contents Under Pressure is a game that's easily recommended to people that are fans of graffiti, fans of kind of hip-hop culture, that sort of stuff. It's got a really good, authentic feel to it that I think really comes across a lot better than games that typically fall into this category. If that's not your thing, the action and the gameplay in Getting Up is still strong enough to make this worth looking at.